Sometimes people think that a realtor who specializes in this is maybe an ambulance chaser. And I get that. I mean, I understand at its face, right? That the world doesn't have the highest trust of realtors to begin with.
Okay.
And then they find that there's somebody who specializes in this who is capitalizing off of the misfortune. And I realize there are a lot of attorneys that don't understand real estate. It's not your job.
Right. I was just thinking that when you said that, I'm like, I think so many people assume attorneys understand everything. We really don't. Like, our zone of genius is very narrow and small.
Understand what your options are because, and the other side as well. I mean, if someone there are very strict underwriting guidelines when it comes to divorce and court orders.
Yeah. Nobody truly really understands the nuances that can go on in selling a house while two parties are divorcing, quite like our next guest, Laurel Starks. I am here today with Laurel Starks. She is a divorce real estate expert. She's been doing real estate for almost 20 years. She is a top 1% realtor in the nation. She's an experienced expert witness, a trained neutral in family law cases, an author, a writer, a speaker, and the founder of the certification program for real estate agents doing divorce real estate. So, Laurel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're so happy to have you because I know you have a wealth of knowledge to share in the area of real estate as it relates to divorce. I know that my firm has used your firm quite often. And I know that, I used to just kind of use any sort of real estate agent. The parties had a friend and, the friend was like, I'll sell your house. And we used to kind of do that. And what I've learned in almost 2 decades of being a divorce lawyer is real estate agents really don't understand all the nuances that can go along with selling real estate while divorcing. So to kick us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about what does it mean to be a certified divorce real estate agent?
Sure. So just like you said, realtors tend to get their real estate license and they look forward to the happy times. I mean, when maybe somebody has gotten their job promotion or it's a family who's buying their first home. Maybe their family's expanding and it's a happy time.
Right.
The other thing is that if there is, maybe like a couple, a family, maybe they don't necessarily agree on everything themselves. They put out those sort of disputes, if you will, on their own behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. When you work as a realtor, when you work in a divorce case, there are many different moving parts and pieces, and really the kind of the characterization of your scope is very different. You're working under the jurisdiction of the court. So the court has jurisdiction over what the parties do, over whether or not the property is sold, all sorts of things with regards to the sale of the property, the court has jurisdiction over. So that's one thing. A lot of times we're working with attorneys just like you.
Yes.
And so again, in the happy family situation, we're just working directly with the people, right? The buyers, the sellers. And here we've got also attorneys who have, their advocates and that sort of thing. And attorneys need to be also involved and yet not overly involved because you guys have your hands full.
Well, that
just
is
a
true.
little.
Yes.
And so we need to be able to take as much off of your plate as possible.
Yeah.
And at the same time, make sure that you're aware of critical issues.
Right.
So there's a balance there.
Yeah.
We work also most of the time. There is high conflict when you step into the world of divorce, but also working with litigators.
Yeah.
You tend to get the higher end of the spectrum of conflict, right?
Right.
So, I mean, we have clients. Probably at least 50% of my cases have restraining orders.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
How do you, when you have a restraining order? One of my very first listings that I ever had, if it's okay, I'll kind of give you some of those scenarios. Sometimes easier to understand when we talk about actual scenarios.
Sure.
So my one of my first ones that I had was a woman who she got, we had the court ordered the property sold. She wanted to sell it, but she lived in the home with her 5-year-old daughter. And she had been a victim of domestic violence. And her soon-to-be ex, there was a restraining order against him. She did not want a lockbox. She didn't want open houses.
Yeah.
She didn't want showings.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you sell a house without access?
So I'm so glad you used this, examples, because these are the types of things that real estate agents that aren't experienced with divorce, like they don't understand these nuances. Yeah.
Right.
So what did you do?
They haven't even thought about.
Yeah, they haven't even thought that could be a possibility.
Right. And they don't ask for a copy of the court order.
Right.
They don't know the questions to even ask. They're excited that they just got a new listing, right?
Yes, right.
And so, and then there's also the importance of being a neutral, because at the end of the day, as a listing agent, we have a fiduciary duty to our clients, to both of them.
Yeah.
And sometimes we like one more than the other, right?
Yes.
Sometimes one is more cooperative than the other.
Easier to work with. Yeah,
easier to work with. So it can be much easier to sort of go to that one for everything.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah.
And leave the other one in the dark.
Yeah.
So it can, there are just like you said, there are so many nuances in working in these environments. And yet it is so critical and important that we get the property sold. Most of the homes that I go in are very toxic. You walk in the house and it is not a good situation.
Ooh, yeah. You can like sense the tension in the air?
You can sense it. You can cut it with a knife.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah.
Huh.
Kids are not living in healthy environments.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
The unknown. It used to be a safe environment, probably.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's a very, it's very toxic. It's also holding up the family from moving forward.
Oh, yeah. The house really is like, it is such like a symbol of, well, I guess it can go both ways, right? Because we were kind of chatting before we started filming, and it was like, I think of my house as a sanctuary of peace. And you mentioned like, yes, when you walk across the threshold of your house, it's like you check the world's problems at the door. And I love how you said that. And it is kind of this symbol of stability and, security, but, suddenly you're now divorcing and this is like not necessarily a safe place anymore. It's keeping the family from moving forward. Like I hadn't really thought of it before in that way, but that's very true.
It is. And it prevents them from, not only are they sort of living in this cesspool, but it also prevents them from being able to establish that new sanctuary.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So important for the psyche of children and for our clients as well.
Right.
And then from a financial perspective too, it's important that the money from the house, the equity from the home, is oftentimes the largest liquid asset they have.
Absolutely.
Right. They might have retirement funds that, maybe that surpass the value, but those aren't liquid right now.
Right. Yeah.
So this is the money that they are going to get in order to rebuild that life.
Yes, absolutely.
And we have to have someone who knows and understands how to, squeeze every penny we can, because this is a family that needs it.
Right. That's very true. Before I ask you my next question, I do want to just point out the first time I worked with you, because you mentioned like your role as this like real estate expert in a divorce is to take sort of a burden off the attorneys. And I just wanted to point out the first time that I worked with you, I was like, wow, like Laurel's doing all that. Like, okay, cool. Like she's got that part of it. Like it was a huge burden off of me. And it really was, it was very comforting for me and my client to know that like you were kind of taking care of that aspect of the case. So I I've experienced that firsthand, and I thank you for that. So what are some myths that you think are kind of still persisting out there about what you do?
Well, I think there are some myths. For example, I think sometimes people think that a realtor who specializes in this is maybe an ambulance chaser. And I get that. I mean, I understand at its face, right? That it can, it's like, okay, the world doesn't have the highest trust of realtors to begin with.
Okay.
And then they find that there's somebody who specializes in this who is capitalizing off of the misfortune.
So it's the thought of like, somebody's making money off of like somebody else's hard times. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
So, so that is one. And I would say there are so many professions that do specialize in the intricacies and the nuances of divorce. I mean, you're a certified family law specialist.
Yes.
Right. And when you got a law degree, it licensed you to do anything, right?
Yes.
Criminal.
Yes.
You've done construction defects.
Yes. Yeah.
To anything.
Yes.
But as you know, as an attorney, when you've got a civil litigator on the other side,
oh, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Total nightmare.
They're a fish out of water.
Yes.
Same thing is true in real estate. When I got a real estate license, I mean, I could even do property management. I could sell commercial. I could do anything. And the more that we realize how nuanced and how specialized and complicated.
Yes. Yeah.
Psychologically.
Right.
Everything.
Yeah.
That
it can be legally complicated.
Divorces.
It can be emotionally complicated. Yeah.
And, and like you said, our job is, and I'm glad that I was able to take a lot off of your plate, but there's also a fine line because I'm not a lawyer.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
So an example, I will have clients who will say, so I'll make a recommendation and I'll say, you know what? We really need to get this patio fixed because it's filled with termites and it's gonna, you're gonna get slammed on an inspection report.
Yeah.
And they say, the first question is, well, if I make those repairs, then am I going to get paid back?
Yeah.
I don't want to make those repairs and she gets to profit off of the money that I'm putting into the house.
Yeah. That's a big issue.
But that's a legal question.
Right.
And I have to know where my line is. I can make the recommendation.
Right.
But I stop short of advising them on whether they're going to get that money back. I don't know what you all have agreed. I don't know what the court has agreed to in terms of those things.
Yeah.
So it's also important that as the real estate person listing the house, we know that line.
Right. That's very true. Yeah. So speaking of, kind of people's perception of a real estate agent that specializes in divorce, how did you come to specialize in that niche?
I know you've said before, family law doesn't find you, or no, you don't find family law.
You have really done your homework. You're like quoting past podcasts. I mean, thank you so much. You're one of 10 people that's watching.
You are. That is not true. That is not true. You are very captivating. So you can't, you start watching Made for More and you just need more.
Oh my, well, thank you so much. Aaron, edit that as a commercial. Yeah, mark that. That's our next commercial.
So that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
My background is, I studied sociology, which I guess you could say plays a big part in this.
Right.
But I became a flight attendant after I graduated, after I finished school, and flew around the world for 10 years.
Okay.
Locked in a metal tube with people that were nice and not nice.
Right.
So,
yes.
I mean, kind of
My mom
similar.
is a flight attendant.
Is she really?
Well, not anymore. She's retired, but she was. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So you kind of get,
yes.
It's a very different world.
Yeah.
It's an identity, it's a lifestyle, all of that. Mm-hmm. When my kids were, when my second son was born and I had two little ones under the age of 3, I decided I didn't want to be flying all over the world anymore. So I got out of that, and then I naturally got into real estate because if you stop flying, you get into real estate.
Okay. I didn't know
Yeah,
Also, Mom, there's your next gig.
That's the succession plan.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. You get out of flying and you get into real estate.
Okay.
And so I got into real estate, and my license was barely dry. And I got a phone call from the father of one of my little 2-year-old's, one of his little friends at the park. They had met at the park, and we became kind of friends with the parents. Yeah. And so the father, he called me one day. He's a divorce lawyer. Calls me one day on his way home from court.
Okay.
And he said, Laurel, I got you appointed to sell this house.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I've only sold one house before. So first of all, just pause on the fact that is all the vetting that went on. Okay.
Right? Yeah.
That was it.
Yes.
And he said, and I said, well, what's appointed mean? I don't even understand what that means. And he said, well, it means the parties couldn't even agree on who to sell. That they can't afford the house. The court ordered it sold. Parties couldn't agree on who to list it with. Yeah. So I gave the judge your name. And the judge said, okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. So I went over to the client's house, and she said, I have to sell my house in 30 days because my son has to start school in Oregon and I need to be out of here.
Oh, yeah.
So the house was a mess. You walk in the front door, and it was one of those houses, you walk in the front door and it's like you walk into the living room.
Okay.
And it was piled high, ceiling to floor with boxes. And it just had this smell. And brown shag carpet. A pipe burst and flooded the house.
Okay.
And she didn't have the money to have proper remediation.
Yeah.
She just kind of used a broom.
Oh, no.
And swept all the water out of the house and aired it out.
Yeah.
So we sat down at the dining room table, and she told me all of the gory details of the demise of her marriage, the affairs, this, that, and the other. And then he was not paying support. And so she didn't have any money.
Right.
She needed the money, and the son has to start school. So you can imagine, first of all, my bias. All of a sudden, I have this image that he's a monster.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I've got to rescue her. So I'm already aligned. And then so she signed my paperwork.
Okay.
Called husband, and he said, hell is going to freeze over before I ever sign to sell the house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He said that she wants to take my son out of the state, and that's not going to happen. So don't ever call me again. Click.
Oh, okay.
He was true to his
Have
word.
A nice day.
Yeah, he was true to his word. I have to say that. And he never did call me again. But how do I sell a house?
Yeah, without his cooperation.
Without his, right.
Yeah.
And so I found myself in court explaining to the judge, because the wife's attorney filed a motion, right, for us to go into court, for the court to make orders.
Yeah.
So again, they don't teach you this in real estate school.
Right.
This isn't what goes on.
Right.
When, Mark and Lucy are buying their dream home.
Right.
So I went into court, and I'm explaining to the judge what happened, what I need. And then the court signed everything on his behalf.
Yeah.
And then we ended up, selling it. So I got several of these cases.
Okay.
And I realized how much as a realtor I needed to learn. Because there just wasn't training for it.
Yeah.
And then the market crashed in '08.
Okay.
And I realized there are a lot of attorneys that don't understand real estate.
Yeah.
And it's not your job.
Right. I was just thinking that when you said that, I'm like, I think so many people assume attorneys understand everything. We really don't. Like, our zone of genius is very narrow and small. But that's why we need experts like you, and that to bring, we bring them in and you guys educate us. Yeah.
Right. And that's what the good lawyers do. And lawyers, you're very smart, and you get it quickly, but also your scope is really to understand the law and to figure out how to formulate an argument and to all of those things. And so, so I realized that lawyers needed educating. And so I started educating attorneys on the real estate issues that matter to them.
Yes,
right. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to know how many open house signs to put out, and like what corners to put them on.
Yeah.
But you need to know what you need to know so that you can formulate those arguments, so that you can properly advise clients and that sort of thing. So then that's really when family law found me. Because I just saw this need. And I saw a lot of people also taking advantage of people who are going through divorce. Investors, other realtors that
because they know like these people desperately need to sell this house.
They're in distress.
Yeah.
And so they fire sale things.
It's like this is like the dark side of real estate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It is.
Yeah. Because I until you said it earlier, I didn't really recognize that like generally real estate is usually like a happy time because you're selling and moving on, or like buying your first house, buying your dream home. Like it's very happy until we get to this. And it's kind of like the dark side of real estate.
It is. Yeah. And it's tough on a realtor. I mean, just like it is on a family law. I mean, you guys have a tough job and you've got to know how to remain strong. I mean, I consider you to be almost like a first responder. Yeah. I mean, how does an ER doctor keep his cool or her cool when there's a crisis at hand and yet you've got a job to do, right? You got a scalpel that you've got to make sure cuts right. Yeah. So it's the emotions can really take over. Yes. And so it's important to be able to know where we can't lose our ability to have empathy for our clients and what the hell they're walking through right now.
Yeah.
It's important to keep that, but it's also important for it to have its place so that we can do our job.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And also I believe you have to keep some sense of objectivity, about like you can be empathetic, but also kind of keep your right mind about you. Just, I think that's what protects the clients the best too, is if you're able to remain objective. Okay, this is my burning question for you that I'm dying to ask you because the issue that I see so often in, I wanted to go like this, but it was this mic. So then it was like an awkward, like off to the side situation. I'm like, well, that was awkward. We gotta do something about this, Erin.
I'm on it.
When she's in court, she slams the table.
I know. Yes. Okay. So the situation I see most often that I think is most torturous for litigants is, one, and quite honestly, depending on what side you're on, well, let me just get to the question and then we can talk about the different aspects of it. So, parties own a house together. It's the marital home. It's the family home. Now they're going through a divorce and like one party is just so attached to this house. And in my experience, and I can totally relate to it because I love houses. Like my house, like I said, is my sanctuary of peace. Like I put a lot into my house. Like my house really matters to me. Like your book, The House Matters. Yes. Yeah. So maybe it's a female thing, but one party is just like so attached to the house. They will do anything to be able to keep this house, but they really can't afford to keep it. So what do you tell those people? Like give me your wisdom on this situation.
And I get it too, by the way. My house is very much my sanctuary. And we see it with men and with women. Okay. Women, tend to be, let's say, the nurturers and maybe they want to make sure that the kids have stability and they're able to keep and a lot of times that's their first thing. A lot of times men have put blood, sweat, and tears in that house.
I was just thinking that, like the men that are doing all the projects on the house, the home improvement. Yes.
They take such pride in that.
Yes, that's very true.
And they've done a great job.
Yes.
And so So it can absolutely be a sort of a torturous. There is a divorce that goes on with the house itself.
The house itself.
And there can be some mourning of that. I find that the ones that have the hardest time with it are the ones that don't know where they're going to go. They don't have a plan. They can't afford something else that's similar to that.
Comparable, right.
But your question is, what happens when they can't afford the house?
Yeah. Or, I mean, maybe they can like eke by, you know, like maybe on paper they can afford it, but it's like, yeah, but then how will you buy groceries? And it's like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. But like, oh my gosh, this person will have no money left over after they pay this mortgage every month. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that can be very tough. Sometimes putting things down on paper, I mean, seeing the black and white budget. Yeah. I find that more people going through divorce do not have basic financial skills.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or they're so overcome and in a fog with so much emotion.
Right.
That they don't actually put the numbers to paper.
Yeah.
And one of the things when I'm working with clients and I show them the actual numbers, it's like these light bulbs go on and they can see. So I would say first and foremost, have them actually, because numbers, it's all monopoly money.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Until it's not, and
until it's not.
And so actually working on a budget. Sometimes that black and white can help make those emotional decisions clearer.
Yeah.
Sometimes not. Sometimes it still is, it's still tough. It's still a process. The house symbolizes a lot. It symbolizes, it was a dream to probably buy it.
Right. Yeah.
I see that a lot of times people who live in it, so long as they stay planted there, maybe the person who left is going to come back. But if they go somewhere else,
oh, interesting.
There's no place to go back to.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, getting the root of why it's important.
Right.
Is and allowing yourself time to, to kind of mourn. It is absolutely not worth strapping yourself financially to keep that house. Forget the fact that it's a trophy because people love to say,
True.
I got the house.
Yes, that's so true. Yeah.
And so let go of that. Right. It's not about you beating him, he beating you in this contest
because nobody really wins.
No one really wins.
Yeah.
This is about you and your future and your ability to, to move through this and to move forward. And money plays, especially in Southern California, money plays, every part in that.
Yeah.
And really, there is no kind of stress like financial stress.
Right. That's very true.
What that does to kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was, in the financial episode that we did, I think that was like my opening remarks are like, you cannot show up as the best version of yourself if you're like under financial stress. It's really hard to do.
Right.
So is there any, cause I know, I think I know the answer to this, but maybe I don't, but if I do, then it will just be further confirmation. Cause my clients are always, so frustrated with me about this, but the house can hold up a case for a really long time because it's like, no, this person wants to keep it, but it's like, well, and the other person's like, no, let's just sell it right now, but we really can't. The court is not allowed to sell it until the time of trial if there's not an agreement. So this house just ends up becoming like this arbitrage around the case and the parties and all of that. Is there anything that you are aware of or that you do in your profession to like speed that along?
Well, again, so yes, there are. So number one, it is understanding what you can do, not what you want to do. Because a lot of times the decision is made about what to do with the house at an underwriter's desk. It's not about what you want to do. I see so many litigants burn through so much time and money fighting for something that was an impossibility to begin with.
Yes, I know. That's the torturous part, I think, when I see that. Yeah.
Know what your credit score is. Pull your credit. The minute you're going to get a divorce, pull your credit and monitor your credit. Right. There can be lots of stuff on your credit that you didn't know that the other spouse was ringing up. Accounts that came up that you didn't know were there. Yeah. IRS liens, all kinds of things that maybe they didn't know about. So it's very important that credit is monitored and that it is pulled. I always say it doesn't matter what your credit score is until you go to use it.
Yeah, that's true. Right? Yes.
Who cares if you're strutting around with an 850? Good for you. But unless you're going to use it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Right. Or if you've got a 500, if you're not going to use it, rebuild. You'll be okay. Yeah. But understand what your options are because, and the other side as well. I mean, if someone is, there are very strict underwriting guidelines when it comes to divorce and court orders. Yeah. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is to make sure that when there are agreements and when there are orders, that they're as clear as possible, that they name who the listing agent is, that they name who is responsible for maintaining the mortgage, that it indicates who is responsible for, improving the house if there are recommendations, that how the proceeds are divided. That's a big one that I see.
Yes.
So, just having that clarity is very important.
Yeah. Okay. So for our last question, is there anything that you really wish people knew that you feel like they don't know and you want to share?
I wrote a book on what people need to know.
Oh,
no,
okay.
No. This was not a shameless plug for the book, I promise. But there's so much that actually I did. It is. I would say, this is a moment in time, and it is a very tough and very difficult time. And this moment will pass. The decisions that you make in this moment are going to affect how quickly and how well you recover. So surround yourself with a good team of people who can advise you well. And know that from a financial standpoint, that there is recovery as well. Get a budget together. Most of my clients are when they sell the house, many of them are couch surfing, living with family, living with friends. Use the time wisely. Give yourself 2 years. It would be amazing to see what you can do in 2 years to rebuild yourself financially. Yeah. If you've been out of the workforce, it's important to get back in it. If the support, spousal, child support, and or the division of assets is not going to be enough.
It's never enough.
It's never enough for one, and it's too much for the other.
It's too much for the other. I just said that yesterday. Yes. Yeah.
So if it's not enough, get into the workforce. And I do believe that it is, I do believe that for someone to step out of the workforce, it is, during the marriage, and I understand I've got 2 children when the kids are little. Yeah. Right. But to remain out of the workforce, they're very vulnerable.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. Well, thank you so much for all your wisdom and insights today. This was great.